My name is Lana, and some stories do not begin with thunder or fire, they begin with a whisper that breaks your bones from the inside. Mine began on a quiet morning, the kind people forget by noon, but for me it will echo until my last breath. I was in the kitchen, the old wooden cabinets humming softly as the kettle heated, the smell of cardamom drifting through the room just the way my daughter likes it. I had spent the entire week preparing little things, ironing the shawl she would wear during her wedding prayers, polishing the corner table where I planned to place her flowers, and setting aside a tiny envelope where I had saved a few notes, folded lovingly, for her new life. My fingers were busy tying a ribbon around a small gold bracelet, an heirloom from my mother, when I decided to ask her, gently, excitedly, with the kind of hope only a mother carries without reason, "Sweetheart, when is the wedding?" She didn't even look up fully, just a sideways glance, a breath, a pause so small it felt disrespectful. Then she said the sentence that cracked the world underneath my feet. "Mom, the wedding already happened. We got married yesterday." The ribbon slipped from my hand. The bracelet hit the floor with a small metallic sound that somehow roared louder in my heart. For a moment, the walls blurred. The kettle whistled in the background, uncaring, constant, while the rest of my life froze around me. Her voice echoed through the soft morning light like a cut that doesn't bleed immediately, but kills everything inside first. I blinked, hoping I misheard her, but the calm in her posture, the absence of guilt or excitement, told me the truth faster than her words ever could. The child whose first steps I captured in trembling hands. The child whose nightmares I chased away with lullabies. The child whose laughter made my entire world worth living. She had taken the most important step of her life, without looking back to see if her mother was watching. I finally managed to whisper, "You got married without me?" But my voice came out so thin, so fragile, it felt like a stranger was speaking through my mouth. She sighed, the kind of sigh people use when they're tired of explaining something obvious. "Mom, it was just a simple ceremony. His family didn't want a big event. We signed the papers, and that's it. Please don't make this emotional. As if the woman who raised her was an accessory she forgot to pack." I watched her fingers decorated with fading henna I hadn't seen applied, and my chest tightened as I noticed the ring on her hand, glimmering like a secret she had chosen to hide from me. I sat down slowly because my legs could no longer trust themselves to hold my weight. My mind began unraveling memories, like old film reels, her tiny fingers holding mine when she had her first fever, her voice trembling as she confessed her fears during college. The nights I stayed awake praying for her success, while she slept peacefully, unaware of the battle scars her mother collected in silence. And then I remembered the day her father died, how she clung to me like I was the only anchor she had left in the world. I had held her, whispered strength into her bones, promised her she would never face life alone. But in this moment, she had made a new promise to someone else. And she had done it quietly, secretly, carefully erasing the space where her mother once belonged. She said, "Mom, don't look at me like that. What's done is done." And with that final sentence, she walked out of the kitchen, leaving behind the scent of cardamom tea, a fallen bracelet, and a silence so heavy it sat on my chest like a stone. I leaned back in my chair and looked around the kitchen. Every corner of that room carried a memory of her childhood. The chipped tiles she had scribbled on as a toddler. The corner where she learned to tie her shoelaces. The window where she used to stand with me, waiting for the rain. And suddenly, all those moments felt like stories of a child who no longer existed. I picked up the bracelet slowly, my hands shaking, as if I were holding the ghost of every sacrifice I had ever made. I placed it on the table and whispered to myself, maybe motherhood is nothing but giving pieces of yourself until there's nothing left to hold. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something deeper happened, something quieter, heavier. A part of me folded inward, like an old letter sealed shut forever. I walked into the living room, the walls covered with photographs of a life we once shared: birthdays, school plays, vacations, her graduation day, when she hugged me with tears in her eyes. And I stood in that room, feeling like a stranger visiting a museum of someone else's memories. Evening arrived slowly, with the sky melting into soft orange, and I waited for her to come to me, to say she was sorry, or that she needed me, or even that she wanted to talk. But the house remained quiet. She stayed in her room, laughing softly on the phone with her new husband, building a brand new life without me. And I stood by the doorway, watching the shadow of her joy, a joy I wasn't invited into. I whispered a prayer for her safety, for her future, for her marriage, because that is what mothers do even when their hearts are breaking. And as the night deepened and the world outside fell asleep, I realized the most painful truth of all. Children don't stop needing their mothers because they grow up. They stop needing them when they decide their mother's heart is no longer part of their journey. And on that day, quietly, silently, without any dramatic storm, my daughter closed a door I had spent my whole life keeping open. That night, long after the house had gone silent, I sat alone in the living room, with only the dim lamp glowing beside me. The shadows on the walls looked longer than usual, stretching like old memories that refused to settle. I kept replaying her words, "We got married yesterday." A sentence so casual and cold that it felt like someone had erased me with a single stroke. I leaned back and allowed my eyes to wander across the room, noticing things I had overlooked for years. The old sofa, where she used to curl up next to me during storms. The bottom drawer of the cupboard, where she hid her little poems. The rug where she took her first steps. Everything around me seemed to whisper stories of a life built together, yet somehow I had become a footnote in her new chapter. I closed my eyes and felt the weight of years pressing down on me. I remembered the nights she stayed out late during college, and I walked the floor until I heard the gate open. I remembered the mornings she skipped breakfast, and I secretly packed snacks in her bag. I remembered the countless fights I shielded her from when her father's anger was too sharp, too loud. And I remembered how she would hold my hand, pressing her cheek against my shoulder, promising she would never leave me alone in my old age. But slowly, quietly, heartbreakingly, she had drifted away. Not suddenly, not with a scream, but with small daily absences, forgetting tiny things at first: our conversations, our traditions, the way she once depended on me for everything. And now, with a wedding she didn't tell me about, she had completed her distance. A circle closed without me inside it. I opened my eyes and looked at our family photo on the wall, a picture taken when she was 12, her smile bright, her arm wrapped around my waist. I touched her face in the photo with trembling fingers and whispered, "Where did you go, my child? When did I lose you?" Morning came, but it didn't bring relief. Instead, it brought a quiet ache that settled into my bones like winter frost. She walked into the kitchen, humming a tune, wearing the same clothes she wore the day she got married, clothes I had never seen, a style I didn't recognize, a color she never used to like. She was someone else's woman now. That thought pierced me in a way I could not hide. She poured herself tea, glanced at me briefly, and said, "Mom, I told you last night. You don't have to think about it so much. Think about it." How could she speak with such simple indifference when my entire world had tilted? I watched her take a sip, her fingers adorned with a new ring, her face glowing with a secret world she had chosen to build without me. And then I noticed something strange. There was a nervousness in her eyes, a quick flicker she tried to hide. I knew that look. I had memorized every version of her expressions since the day she was born. Something was not right. And yet, before I could ask, she spoke too quickly. "We didn't want drama, Mom. It was simple. Just a few close people. A lie." I could feel it. She had always been terrible at lying. Her voice rose just slightly, her shoulders stiffened, and she blinked too much. My heart sank even deeper. Not only had she hidden her wedding, she was hiding something else as well. I leaned forward, speaking softly. Did his family not want me there? She froze for a moment. That tiny pause told me more truth than her words ever could. She shook her head and forced a smile. "It wasn't like that, but I saw it. I felt it. Somewhere, someone had decided I didn't belong at her wedding, and she had agreed." A quiet rejection that stung sharper than any insult spoken out loud. I looked at her hands again, her new life shining on her skin, and realized something devastating. Mothers don't lose their children in one moment, they lose them in pieces. A forgotten phone call, a skipped meal together, a broken tradition, a withheld truth. And this wedding, this silent, hidden wedding, was the last piece falling away. Later that afternoon, the truth began revealing itself like a slow, painful dawn. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, and when I opened it, I found a small envelope addressed to my daughter. The sender's name was her husband's cousin, a girl I remembered only faintly. Out of routine, I called my daughter to give it to her. She came rushing, but when she saw the envelope, her face changed. Blanched, fearful, she snatched it quickly, muttering, "It's nothing." But mothers hear the words that children don't speak. She hurried back to her room and closed the door. The moment the latch clicked, my chest tightened. I walked to the hallway, and without meaning to, I overheard fragments of her hushed conversation over the phone, words like "she'll find out, and we shouldn't have done it so fast, and I didn't know she'd react like this." My heartbeat stuttered. What had she done fast? What was she hiding from me? Why was my presence, my simple, loving, motherly presence, something they were afraid of? When she finally stepped out, her eyes were red, but she wiped them quickly, pretending nothing happened. She sat beside me on the sofa, her voice trembling slightly as she said, "Mom, don't ask too many questions, okay?" I stared at her face, my daughter, who once ran to me for every answer, now begging me not to search for truth. A strange, heavy silence filled the room. The kind that grows roots and pulls everything down with it. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. She had brought a secret into this house, and secrets have footsteps. They move silently, rearranging everything. I looked at her closely and whispered, "What are you afraid I will find out?" She stiffened. Her lips parted to speak, but no sound came out. And in that moment, I knew deep in the ache behind my ribs that I was standing at the edge of a storm much bigger than a hidden wedding. That night, the house felt heavier than ever before, so heavy that even breathing felt like a task I had to consciously remember. I tried pretending everything was normal, cooking dinner the way I always did, setting the plates on the table, waiting for her to join me like she used to when she was little, but she didn't come. Instead, I heard whispers behind her door, her voice trembling, urgently trying to convince someone that everything was under control. Every syllable carried a fear I had never heard in her before. I walked past her room slowly, deliberately, my footsteps barely making a sound. A mother learns to listen through walls long before her child learns to speak. And tonight, her silence spoke louder than her words ever could. Something was terribly wrong. I went back to the kitchen and sat alone, the untouched food growing cold. The quiet around me felt unnatural, like a deep hollow in the world that used to be full. My mind drifted to the moment she was born. How? I held her tiny hand and whispered a promise to protect her with everything I had. But now, sitting alone at this old table, I realized with a crushing ache that I no longer knew what she needed protection from, or whether she even wanted my protection at all. The hours crawled by, and when she finally emerged, her face pale, her eyes swollen, she avoided my gaze. She said she was tired. She said she wanted to sleep early. But every word sounded like a shield she was lifting between us. That night, when she closed her bedroom door again, it felt like a lifetime of motherhood was left standing in the hallway uninvited. The next morning brought the storm I had sensed creeping toward us. It wasn't loud. It didn't come through shouting or breaking things. It arrived quietly, wrapped in a phone call. I was in the living room when her phone vibrated on the sofa. And before I could call her, the screen lit up with the name her husband's mother. My breath caught. My hands trembled. I didn't touch the phone. I simply stood there, frozen, watching it ring. When she arrived and answered it, she stepped into the corner of the room, speaking in a low, tense voice. But even in whispers, truth finds a way to reach a mother's ears. Her mother-in-law's voice was sharp, angry, filled with a superiority that cut through the silence. Did your mother find out? She should not be involved. We agreed no drama from that old woman. My heart lurched, my daughter clenched, her jaw whispering, "No, no, she doesn't know anything," her voice trembling like a child caught between loyalty and fear. I felt something inside me collapse again, not as a sudden break, but as something that had been cracking slowly for years and had finally given up. I turned away before she could see the expression on my face, before she could see how deeply the words pierced me. Old woman, drama, not involved. This was how they spoke of me, the woman who carried her, raised her, fought the world for her. I walked toward my room, feeling each step becoming heavier than the last, but her words stopped me cold. We had to do it fast, or they wouldn't accept us. Mom wouldn't have agreed. She would have asked questions. Questions? Questions about what? My heart pounded painfully against my ribs. I leaned against the wall, breathing slowly, as if bracing myself for a truth I never asked for, but was destined to hear. She hung up the phone abruptly, and when she turned, she saw me standing there. For the first time since her marriage, guilt washed over her like a visible, trembling shadow. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand gently not to silence her, but because I wasn't sure my own voice could survive her explanation. I whispered, "So this is why your wedding didn't need me." She looked down, her shoulders shaking. And in that moment, I finally understood she was not just hiding details from me. She was hiding parts of her life she believed I would disapprove of. Parts someone else told her I had no right to question. She sat beside me on the sofa, the air thick with unspoken truths. Her fingers twisted nervously in her lap, the ring on her hand glinting, like a reminder of everything she had done in secrecy. I waited, not because I wanted to hear an apology, but because after all these years, a mother always waits for her child to come back to her. Slowly, she began to speak. Her voice cracked. "Mom, we rushed the wedding because his family said they would only accept me if we married immediately. They didn't want a big ceremony. They didn't want neighbors talking. They didn't want anyone questioning our match. And they said if you were there, they would refuse." Her words hit me like a blade pressed slowly into my chest. Not a stab, a push, a deliberate, suffocating push meant to break a mother quietly. She continued, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd ask why. You'd ask what their problem was. And, Mom, I didn't want to choose between you and him." The room blurred. Not because of tears I didn't cry, not yet, but because the truth was finally standing naked between us. Her husband's family didn't want me at the wedding. They didn't want my presence, my approval, my blessings. They wanted to erase the part of her life that came from me, and she let them. She chose a new home over the one that raised her. She chose acceptance from strangers over love from the woman who had given up her own dreams so she could have a better life. I looked at her face broken, trembling, desperate, and after what felt like a long lifetime, I finally spoke. My voice was quiet, but every word carried the weight of years. "You did not just hide your wedding from me. You hid yourself." She burst into tears, falling forward, grabbing my hands, as if trying to pull herself back into the mother she had abandoned. I held her gently, not because she deserved forgiveness instantly, but because motherhood does not know how to turn away from a child in pain. And for the first time since she said we got married yesterday, I allowed myself to cry not for the wedding I missed, but for the daughter I was losing, piece by piece, to a world that never wanted me in it.